Yeah, so the two main things you said that you had a problem with were, I believe, egoism, anarchism, and then you said something about trans rights or something like that.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, yeah, I
If
disagree.
you
Yeah, probably
want,
disagree.
so how about you pick the topic, and then if you want, we can both give like short opening statements based on like our opinions or our frameworks, and then we can kind of just jump into talking about it.
Okay, sure. Um, so I guess I think we can probably start with like anarchism, I guess, because you are an anarchist, right?
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Yeah, and I pretty strongly disagree with anarchism. Yeah, so I guess we can start on that. Would you like me to start off first, or?
Yeah, you go ahead. Oh, by the way, so you're
Yeah.
Vexy. Nice to
Yes.
meet you. I'm Mr. Kai. Just for the audience, I started recording, by the way.
Okay. All good. Um. Okay. So on anarchism, I guess my disagreement is, well, yeah, I mean, hmm, yeah,
Definition.
I guess yeah, okay, definition. Well, I mean, I know that you're like on the anarcho-capitalist side. I don't really like. Yeah, I disagree with anarcho-capitalism the most. I don't really know much about like left-wing anarchism. I don't really care about it too much. I'm not a
Mhm.
left-wing anarchist either, but yeah, I'm probably what you would call a statist. I think that the state should exist in some capacity. Um, for a variety of reasons. I think that it's good to have state institutions. I think that it's produced some of the best societies we have around, stuff like that. Yeah, I guess that's kind of my like basic thought on it so far. Curious to see what you think.
Sure. Okay. Well, so I'll start with my definition of anarchism, which is the correct definition of anarchism, is the organization of society on the basis of voluntary cooperation without political institutions or hierarchical government. And so that's
Hmm.
where what you would consider right wing anarchism, I would consider true anarchism because anarchism is this idea of complete voluntarism. So the most accurate statement would be I'm a voluntarist, but voluntarism is the same thing as anarchism. It's the same thing as capitalism. They're all like different forms of the same framework of society. And the way I see it is we ought to be a voluntarist society if we want to maximize everyone's well being. And really quickly, I'm just going to go over the points why I think that's the case. So, first of
Sure.
all, I believe that living in a world with scarce resources, conflict is going to be inevitable, meaning that if there's a certain amount of water, there will always be conflict over who gets that water and how much water they get. I believe that the best way to minimize conflict is through voluntarism, meaning that we avoid violence except for
Mm.
self defense. That's the most important thing. And this is where the NAP, the non aggression principle, comes into play because violence is not going to solve our problems. We need to negotiate, we need to have standards. We can't just resort to attacking each other, taking each other's things, would it be defrauding, deceiving each other, frauding
Mm.
people, taking, manipulating people. I think that we should get rid of these things so that we can have a voluntarist society, so that we can maximize everybody's well-being. I also believe in private property rights because private property rights reduce conflict. If we don't have private property rights, then essentially what we do have is might makes right. Meaning, if somebody lands somewhere, they build a house, they start a farm, and then somebody comes later and takes all that stuff, they would be violating their private property rights, and therefore they would be violating the first come first serve principle. Um, and that leads me into my next point, which is that I think that the first come, first serve principle is the only way to establish private property rights. There's no other way to do it, and any other way results in violence. And then I believe that we need to have consistency, non arbitrariness in law, because we need to have an equal law across the playing field. Every single law needs to be equal to everyone. We need to have a blind lady justice. It's the reason why she wears the thing over her eyes, whatever it's called. is
Mhm.
because she must be blind and she must be completely impartial to justice. But it seems like in the legal system we have nowadays, we are very biased in the way that we judge people. So those are pretty much my positions for my voluntarist society and what I want.
Okay. Um, right. So yeah, a couple of things I disagree with there probably. I guess first thing we'll start off is because you talked about voluntarism. Um, do you believe that private property is voluntary?
Do I believe that private property is voluntary?
Yeah.
Um, I can't see a system that I can't see a non. Wait, how do I word this? I can't see
Mhm.
a voluntarist system without private property. Does that make sense?
Okay. So you think private property is necessary for like a voluntary system?
Yes. Yeah, pretty much.
Hmm. Okay. What I guess what do you mean by voluntary? Do you have like a definition for it or?
Yeah, so voluntarism would just be the idea of like um let's see. Let me just look up the definition. The principle
Yeah.
of relying on voluntary action used especially with reference to the involvement of voluntary organizations. So I guess the
Mhm.
best way to say this would be the NAP, essentially negotiating with people, not doing anything that would be an act of aggression. If you understand,
Mhm.
do you understand what we mean by aggression in libertarian terms?
Yeah, I think I do. I have a problem with that as well, but we'll get to that.
Okay, that's fine. That would be my view of voluntarism, not committing acts of aggression.
Hmm. Okay. Right. So okay, so your concept of voluntarism is based on the non-aggression principle.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Um, okay. So you take a bit of a different definition than what I was expecting. I had like a debate with Sithis on this. That I think I
Yeah,
mentioned that to you.
I saw a
Yeah.
highlight.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That one was about argumentation ethics, which I guess you don't. I imagine you don't believe in, but
I do
um.
believe in it, but it's complicated.
Oh, okay. That'd be interesting to talk about. Um, but yeah, basically one of the things that I also debated him with when it came to voluntarism is because like the general notion that people have of voluntarism or like a voluntary society is like basically there's no enforced or like forced rules that people have to follow, right, or something like that. Like it's like basically like people would say that like the state is not voluntary because they force like for example taxation. It's like forced you to like take some like a portion of your income allegedly. It's what like
Mm-hmm.
I hear from a lot of libertarians. And my general response to that is that like if you think about like private property, and the reason I asked you the question in the first place is because not necessarily like private property is also a system that has some enforced rules that we have to follow, or else it's enforced through violence, similar to how the state functions.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I guess you kind of escape that criticism because you take a definition just based on the non-aggression principle. Um, when it comes to the non-aggression principle, I actually see my problem with that is the non-aggression principle. To, like from what I see, is kind of pretty question begging. And the reason I say that is like the because like on a fundamental level the non-aggression principle is just like the idea that you should not commit aggression, right, or you're not allowed to or whatever. But what aggression is obviously something that's not inherent. Like the non-aggression principle itself doesn't really form any kind of argument about what aggression is. You have to kind of formulate like like you kind of have to bake in a concept of private property to into the NAP first to establish like what aggression is and isn't.
Mm-hmm.
um, like yeah, like this is like something that I say to like when to a lot of libertarians that like 'cause I've heard the idea that people try to make like the NAP like the basis of their like ethic, but you can't really do that because to even like establish an NAP, you have to have like a concept of like a sort of normative view of what property rights exist. All right, you can't just say like, oh, you're not committing aggression. It's like, okay, well, I could just define aggression in a way that like I don't believe the state is aggressive because let's say I believe that the state rightfully owns the tax income it collects. Well, therefore, it's not aggression because it's ownership.
Well, hold on right there.
So
I want to stop you
yeah,
about something you said right there.
yeah, sure.
You said something to the effect of like the normative assumptions of the NAP. I want you to understand that I
Mhm.
believe the correct libertarian position is that there is no normative implications within the NAP.
Oh, okay. Why do you believe that?
Well, because I don't believe that normativity exists, and that could be a completely different conversation.
Mm.
But yeah,
So, okay. So do you believe like the NAP is like a descriptive like idea? Like it's purely like describing reality?
um, no. So I don't believe it's descriptive. I believe that the NAP is a legal system that reduces conflict.
Okay, so legal system. So um okay, so when you say it's a legal system, is it just like 'cause, I know some libertarians refer to legal in the sense of like natural law, but natural law is also morality, I believe.
Yeah, I have
But,
problems with natural law too.
mhm. So I assume when you say illegal, you're talking about like just you mean in the sense that it's just something we should follow, though should is also a normative concept, so I'm not too sure what you mean there. Um,
Well, there's a
you have
difference
like
between
a
ought and there's a difference between ought and normativity. But that gets into metaethics.
mhm.
If we're
um
talking about
okay.
the normativity of an ethical system,
Mhm.
and this is a whole rabbit hole that I'm not sure you want to go down today, but like we could if you want. Because my basis is in philosophy.
Mhm.
I just reject the notion that we have a basis for moral realism. I don't see any evidence for that at all.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, my beliefs on metaethics are kind of all over the place, to be honest. I think that I lean somewhat in favor of a form of moral realism, which we could get into. Um, but yeah, I'm like not certain on it. Like I would say, like my like belief in like realism versus anti-realism is like 51 to 49%. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm not entirely like sold, and I could be like convinced the other way. But at the
Gotcha.
moment, like yeah, I've had I've had like listened into like sort of interesting arguments from like the realist side that's kind of moved me in that direction. Like like recently. But yeah. But yeah, I guess we don't need to get that in the moment. But all right. So
Yeah, back to the
on
NAP
the
though. You were talking about the NAP,
yeah
right?
yeah. So yeah, it is a bit hard, I guess, to detach the NAP from like I guess your meta ethical basis because
Mm-hmm.
so in terms of you saying it's a legal system and it's not but it's not an ought. It's just something. Would you say it's something you should follow, but not should in a normative sense, basically?
Yeah, so the way I would phrase it, and this is where normativity gets weird.
Mm-hmm.
I prefer to stay away from the word morality altogether because morality, I have so much criticism for the term morality. It's so
Mm-hmm.
incredibly vague and misunderstood by so many people. So the words I prefer to use are value systems or value frameworks, okay? Because they're
Mm-hmm.
far more accurate in the things that we're trying to um uh prioritize or the they are far more accurate in describing the things that we are trying to seek. So I think one thing that me and you would both agree on is the same. We have the same ideal in our value systems, which is we want a society where there is maximized well-being for the most amount of people. Right? Would you agree with that or no?
Yeah, I'm a pretty classical utilitarian actually, so yeah, that's pretty much my principle. Yeah,
Okay,
maximizing
cool.
utility.
That's probably one of the things that's going to distinguish me from other libertarians that you've talked to. Uh well, I am a consequentialist.
Hmm.
So so that might be a little bit weird for you, but I'm a consequentialist. I think that's the true position for libertarianism, and I have beliefs why that's the case. But in a consequentialist system, I believe that the voluntarist framework is the most effective in achieving our consequentialist objective of maximizing well-being.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, I'd be interested to hear your arguments for that. If yeah, that sounds interesting.
Hmm.
Like what would be your reasoning for why it's like you would say voluntarism is the best way to maximize
Well,
well-being?
sure. Well, okay, so I already laid it out, but I can put it in
Oh, okay.
different terms. In my opening position, I laid it out, but I'll just run through a few things and then you can respond to those things. So
Sure.
I believe that voluntarism is the best system to maximize everybody's well-being because it's based on non-violence, consent, and mutual benefit. So first of all, it reduces
Mhm.
conflict, and the reason why is because voluntarism eliminates coercion in the literal sense, which is the primary source of conflict. When we respect private property and autonomy, it ensures that people can coexist. So in a voluntarist system, people are incentivized to engage in mutually beneficial exchanges. They're not going to be looking for short term or any fraudulent type of situations. And if they do, there's going to be natural repercussions for those things. So in a voluntarist society, you're looking for win-win outcomes at
Mhm.
every single corner, basically. And this essentially just scales to prosperity. But yeah, the most important thing is that people need to be free to choose because choosing is the most important part of maximizing well-being.
Hmm. Okay.
That was a lot, but yeah, if there's any little part you want to pick at right there, you can go ahead.
Yeah, no. Right. Yeah, I probably disagree with that. Um, yeah, I guess, I don't know if we probably disagree on economics as well when it comes to because I imagine you probably believe in like some sort of, do you believe in like an Austrian sort of economic theory or?
Yeah, of course. Praxeology is my basis. Hey, keep talking for a little bit. I'm just gonna refill my water, okay?
Oh, okay, all good.
I'm listening to you
Um,
though.
sure. So, yeah, well, when it comes to like the question of what best maximizes utility, I take that to be, at least in my sense, sort of like an empirical question a lot of the time. I don't know if I would necessarily like. I'm skeptical of the idea that non-violence inherently, or like adherence to the NAP, is inherently the best way to maximize utility. Because I think that there are probably lots of sort of intuitive cases we can come up with where um, I think that if we had like an NAP system where that probably wouldn't be the case, or there'd be an increase of suffering. I guess if I had to think of an example or like a hypothetical, like I guess you're aware of like the typical examples that people would throw at libertarians, right? It's like if you had to steal a penny to save the world,
Mm-hmm.
that's obviously some utility maximizing to steal, but
Yeah.
the like if we adhere to the NAP, that's obviously that we would have to prohibit that, right?
Right. Yeah. Because stealing would be illegal.
hmm Yeah, so don't you think that's kind of contradictory there? Like, if we want to maximize utility, we have to do. You're saying that we have to do it the only way to do it peacefully, but there are situations where you'd agree that it kind of serves opposite ends, where the NEP would say to do something that doesn't maximize utility.
Um, so the way I would see this is that the way the
hmm
world works, and I'm going to answer your question, but the way the world works is that there are certain trends, and you could call it like natural. I don't want to use the term natural law in the philosophical sense, but there are
hmm
natural laws within the universe that follow certain trends and patterns, and this is baked into human behavior. And so the way that humans work is that if we had different rules that govern this system, like there
hmm
could be, what is it? There could be a universe where communism is the best system because human behavior was changed. But the way I see this is that um, to maximize the well being of the most amount of people, based on the principles of our universe, which is
hmm
human action driven by self interest, voluntarism is the best system to have checks and balances on all our behavior. So to answer the question of would I steal a penny to save the world? Um,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a good person to ask that question because I have certain philosophies about life itself. If
hmm
we're working in a economic system that's that cause that to be illegal, it is illegal and it's not moral. So I wouldn't see it the world dying as an immoral action. The way I would see it is people can choose to do that, and there would be many people who would steal a penny, and then they would have to pay restitution for stealing a penny back to whoever they stole the penny from. So that's how I would see it. So they probably would steal a penny. Would I steal a penny? I guess probably. But then I would have to pay the consequences for that crime.
Okay. Right. So if I understand your answer, basically you don't think that it's like, I guess, moral, or that you like, as you mentioned, you think whoever were to do it would deserve some kind of restitution, but um you don't necessarily say they ought not do it. Is that right?
They ought not do it. It depends on what you're, because the way I look at the world is not in the typical sense of there are right and there are wrong things, because I would say that that language is extremely vague and it's misunderstood. It's misunderstood by 99% of people. When you're saying that something is right or wrong, there must be an objective standard for that thing. But people have yet to prove that there are objective standards for morality. Like, that has to be proven in order for us to accept that. So if you would say, is it right or wrong to steal a penny? I would say it might be a category. What is it called? A categorical error? Because I don't view the world in the terms of, is this action right or wrong? I view it in the terms of, well, actually, to use your language, I would say within your value system, is it right or wrong? So for a consequentialist, that would be the right action to take. But if you're a moral realist, that would be the wrong action to take. But there's no objective standard there. Do you see that? Do you see what I'm saying?
Okay, so well, when you say it would be the wrong action for a moral realist, do you mean like it would be wrong for a deontologist, or were you saying like, I was a bit confused there.
Any type of moral realist. So moral realists are people that believe that there are objective standards of morality, and that this morality is independent of human cognition, right? So they believe that there are right actions to do, like stealing is a wrong action. It will always be wrong. Even take your penny example. If they had to steal a penny to save the world, they wouldn't do it because stealing is wrong. It's objectively wrong, and there's no exception to that rule. It's always wrong because they believe in this black and white standard of moral realism. But if you're a consequentialist, actually, I guess I don't know. It's hard. We have to get into meta ethics because I don't know how consequentialists view moral realism. Honestly, I don't know if you can be a moral realist and a consequentialist. That's kind of a topic for another day. But yeah, a moral realist would definitely not steal a penny if it was wrong.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, because it sounds I think that, well, like I mentioned, I'm actually a moral realist to some extent, and I mean, like, it kind of seems that your concept of moral realism kind of bakes in that it's like a deontological concept, but like there are moral realists, consequentialists. Like,
can I ask you how that works then? If you're a consequentialist and a moral realist, how do you pair those things?
Yeah, sure. Well, the way I look at it is, when it comes to utilitarianism or consequentialism, utilitarianism does have a rule, right? The rule is just to maximize utility. That's, and in a way that kind of makes, in my view, one of the most parsimonious sort of ethical systems, because when you look at deontology or deontological systems, they have all these variety of different rules, and it kind of seems like like a subjective ethic inherently, to me at least, where it's like, okay, it's like, we have these things are wrong, these set of random actions we desire are wrong. They're wrong based solely on the fact that they are like just actions we consider wrong in and of themselves. It's probably not the best way to word deontology, but you get what I mean. But like utilitarianism, just it's a very simple and like singular rule. It's just we ought maximize utility. And I see that, like, that I see that as pretty compatible with moral realism. In fact, I think that, like, and I guess we can get into the meta ethics a bit, but like I see, like, in my view, actually, I would say that utilitarianism is the only view to me that makes sense if we grant that moral realism is true. So I guess we're going like complete opposite ends there.
Interesting. Okay, if I had to steel man your position, I would say that you are a moral realist that believes that the right thing to do is to maximize well-being for the most amount of people, and your
Yeah.
methodology of achieving this objective of maximizing well-being is by doing any means necessary to do so.
Um, any means necessary. Yeah, well, I mean, I think I guess the classic utilitarian, like way to phrase utilitarianism is that the ends justify the means, sort of, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where it's
Yeah.
yeah, it's like we care about the end of the outcomes is what matters, and yeah, the means aren't as relevant to utilitarianism. Yeah, I would say that like yeah, basically my view on moral realism is just like the idea that there's like stance independent reasons for action is kind of how I view that. But yeah, that's just my view.
Okay, interesting. I think that, yeah, that makes sense because your meta ethic is realism, and then your
Yeah.
methodology, your normativity system is consequentialism. Okay, well, I guess that makes sense. I could be
Yeah.
wrong, but it makes sense right now intuitively in front of me. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, so you had disagreements for why voluntarism um, won't be the best legal system because the way I look at this is that
Hmm.
I also value, I wouldn't say it's morally objective that
Hmm.
maximizing well-being is the best thing to do or is the right thing to do. I would say that I value that we maximize everybody's well-being. And my methodology for achieving that is the same as your methodology. It's a consequentialism.
Hmm.
Or I guess you could even maybe I don't want to use the term utilitarianism because I could be incorrect there. But
Hmm.
consequentially, my methodology for achieving that outcome is a voluntarist society. So
Hmm.
why do you think that voluntarism can't or lacks something that will achieve this ends?
Um, yeah, well, I guess it's yeah, it's a variety of things. It's like that kind of gets I guess into like for example like economics, right? Is one thing that I brought up because I feel
Mm-hmm.
um like when it comes to what maximizes well-being, I think that there's we like the way I generally look at how we can observe if a society is maximizing well-being is I'm very big on the idea of empiricism, and we observe we have abilities to observe certain what we call it like outcomes that I think correlate with the maximization of utility in society. And I think at least based on the evidence we have, it seems to me that the societies that are going the farthest in terms of maximizing utility seems to be ones that kind of the ones that we have today on some level. Like with sort of mixed economic models, I believe they've achieved quite a bit. And I guess we probably disagree on that because I know that we disagree on economics. I take the more kind of standard view of economics, the sort of neoclassical Keynesian sort of way. And so that's kind of where I lean on that. I believe that that I don't think that just by avoiding or believing in the NAP and believing in the specifically the libertarian system of property rights is necessarily the best way that we have to design society to have people's utility maximized. I believe that there I base my sort of property theory entirely on utilitarianism. I believe that people like the best way to distribute resources just based on what minimizes suffering and maximizes the good valence or the good like pleasurable experiences. Um, and um, and I think that there can be cases where, like as I mentioned, that I believe that force may be necessary to redistribute or shape society in a way that leads to better outcomes. I guess like
Mm-hmm.
a classic example that people would cite against your side would be like climate change. An example. I think utilitarianism. We have like I'm a utilitarian, and I'm also I don't know if you've heard of the like philosophy of like effective altruism. But like I'm an effective altruist as well. I believe that long-term consequences matter quite a bit as well. I believe things that, for example, climate change is uh, gonna like has the potential to cause very large amounts of suffering, and I believe that if intervention has the capability to enforce, has the ability to reduce suffering on that level, then I believe that's something that's justified in my view. Yeah,
Okay.
like that's a long ramble, but yeah.
So a couple things there. First, we kind of talked about welfare and we talked about climate change.
Sure.
So I want to start with welfare first, okay?
Sure.
I actually believe that I'll just state what I believe and then I'll challenge you on your beliefs. I believe
Sure.
that the most efficient way to make the economy stronger
Hmm.
is through completely free markets. And there's a
Hmm.
couple reasons why I believe. Would you at least agree with me that a complete free market is the most efficient way to handle money? Would you agree with me on that at least, or no?
When you say most efficient way, like the free market, sorry, when you say the free market,
Mm-hmm.
you're talking about absent like any kind of government intervention whatsoever, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I probably disagree with that.
Okay, cool. Um, all right, where to begin there? Okay.
Mhm.
And that might have been a vague statement. What I meant to say is the free market is the most effective way to allocate resources appropriately to where they should go based on the values of the people within the system. So the way I see it is that
Mhm.
okay, if the value here is benefiting poor people, let's start with that. So the value of benefiting poor people. Okay. So one
Mhm.
system, we have a free market. Another system, we have a mixed market, we have a welfare state, okay? If
Mhm.
you have these two systems side by side, um,
Mhm.
the system of the free market is going to be more long-term oriented and more efficient in its money, and I'll tell you why. The reason is because the welfare state, what it will do is it will have lots of welfare programs that are going to benefit people, like let's say like homeless people, impoverished people, people with low income. It's going to give them benefits, grants,
Mhm.
scholarships, welfare packages, things like this, so that they can survive and continue to work. Whereas in the free
Mhm.
market system, what's going to happen is there will be no welfare, there will be no taxes, and
Mhm.
the money that would either be taxed from the corporates are going to be reinvested into the corporations, they're going to be reinvested into the businesses, and it's going to cause price deflation, technology increases, things like this. Would you agree with my statements so far?
So if I understand your statement correctly, you believe that that the free market will be more effective at, like, say, solving poverty, for example, because of like it would essentially lower the price of goods, something like
Well,
that.
I'm not there yet. Right now, I'm just trying to get you to agree with the idea that if we had a free market and
Mhm.
we didn't tax like corporations for billions and billions, maybe even trillions of dollars, and they
Mhm.
instead reinvested those profits, because what corporations always do is they always reinvest their profits, and people even give them criticisms for this, stock buybacks, things like that. They always
Mhm.
are going to reinvest their profits to make their businesses with corporations stronger, more efficient. They're going to invest in more things, and therefore they're going to become more efficient, and they're also going to have competition with each other, which is going to create price deflations. So, do you agree with these things, or do you think something else would happen?
Um. Yeah, economics is a bit difficult. I think that I think generally speaking, if we assume like the kind of sort of perfectly competitive market that is only exists in like economics textbooks, then I would agree that like yeah, that probably is the case. But I think that when we look into the real world, I think there tends to be a lot of varying factors that come into play that might affect how efficient the economy is just like solely on based on free market principles.
All right,
Does
let's
that make
do it.
sense?
Let's. So we've got a free market. I want you to create the externalities and then critique the system. So, what externalities would the free market corporations run into? What kind of things would stop them from reinvesting their money, lowering their prices,
Mhm.
things like this? How do you think that would happen?
Sure. So when it comes, well, actually, what I want to do actually more is we'll touch on the welfare point. I think like just a little bit in terms of how I see why like the free market can't solve for like poverty in the same way that a welfare state can. Um, like, and my reasoning for that is basically I think that there's an externality in that the market fundamentally what it the way that distributes income fundamentally is either it distributes income to people who work and distributes
Mm-hmm.
income to people who own. Right, those are the two ways you can get money in a purely free market system. Either you work, like you do labor, or you own something. You own like stock or factories, or you own the company,
Okay.
and you get receive benefits from that ownership, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, no, and I think that there's a large when we look into the statistics we have in society when it comes to what sort of population demographics we have. Like for example, in the U.S., I'm not from the U.S., but I know these statistics off the top of my head is that I believe there's about like 50% of the total population are non-workers. So that includes people like the disabled, the elderly, like children, stuff like that who are non-workers, and like these people do not receive any kind of market income because they don't work and they don't own anything. And so I think that necessarily that's an externality in the sense that I don't think the market alone could ever provide any kind of income to those people. Um, like you would need like it's and so that's why I believe that it would necessarily lead to a greater level of poverty if we didn't have a welfare state.
Wait, how do you, sorry, walk me through this. How do you become more
Yeah.
impoverished? How do you become more impoverished as corporations grow stronger without taxes?
Uh, so when it comes to basically, what I was kind of trying to describe is just based on if we compare like a free market system versus like the sort of welfarist state that I'm proposing, like
Mm-hmm.
like if corporations grow stronger, and let's assume for like the sake of the discussion that they will like continue to grow and like reinvest because they aren't getting taxed. Um,
Do you
the
believe
issue
that,
with
or do you disagree with that?
so I think that yeah, like I probably agree in some sense that I agree that like if we leave if we allow corporations to keep the money instead of taxing them, that they would be able to like grow. But I think that on aggregate, if we think like as a society as a whole, I'm not fully convinced of that like that's necessarily a more efficient form of distribution of the money in society than like this and then like having state intervention, if that makes
Well, that's
sense.
fine, but we haven't gotten there yet. I'm trying to I'm trying to build a case, and I'm walking you step by step through it, and I want to see what we fundamentally agree on and disagree on. And what I've noticed so far is what we
Hmm.
might fundamentally disagree on is the difference in human behavior. That might
Hmm.
be the core part of our disagreement. And so that's why I'm walking you through this scenario, because I want to see exactly what we agree on. The way that
Hmm.
I believe human behavior operates is that in a free market, your interests are going to become long term because investment is incentivized. Whereas in a non-free market system, long-term thinking is going to be de-incentivized because of taxes, capital gains taxes, corporate taxes, inflation, things like these. So the difference in
Hmm.
human behavior is really important to understand here. And I want to know that if you believe billionaires want to create like infinite more wealth by investing their money back in their projects, or if they want to like keep all of it and sit on it or something. That's what I want to see, what you agree with, what you disagree with.
Hmm. Um, yeah, I mean, like, if your question is just asking me, like, will companies reinvest into to grow? Like, yeah, I think probably that's yeah generally like the case. I wouldn't assume that there's any reason why they wouldn't. Like, yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that seems to be like the general thing that companies do when they generate profits. So yeah, I don't
Okay,
think I
cool.
reject that. Yeah.
All right, cool. All right, so then the next step. So the next step
Hmm.
from here is the corporations are going to reinvest a lot of their money so that they can get more profits in the future, so that they're going to have even more money. Because this is what people want to do. People seek profit. I would
Hmm.
say all people seek profit, and that's not a bad thing. But people with, all people from all walks of life are going to want profit. And so the billionaires are going to also want profit. And so they're going to reinvest their money. They're going to get all this money and they're going to reinvest into their businesses. And the natural currents, the natural processes of this is that
Hmm.
as more businesses form and rise up, what they're going to do is they're going to compete for each other because the customers are a scarce resource. There's only a limited amount of buyers. And so if you want people to buy your product, which several other businesses have, they have
Mhm.
to compete to make that product better in some way. Do you agree or disagree with this?
Basically the idea is that as companies, like everybody essentially believe that people are profit seeking, so there's going to be, people competing for like the consumer's money, and that's gonna basically you're asking me if like I agree that there'll be competition.
Mm-hmm. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, generally speaking, yeah, I don't think I disagree with that.
Okay. And so the next, what I would go from here is I would say that
Mhm.
in a competition where we have several businesses competing for the customer, what they're going to do
Mhm.
is they're going to have to make their product better, or they're going to have to lower their prices. And a lot of the times it's going to be both of these things. So would you agree with that?
Okay, so yeah, so basically to compete well, they're gonna have to lower prices or make the product better. Yeah, once again, I think yeah, generally speaking, that yeah probably is the case. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So if we have this stacking year over year, and if we take the tax dollars that would have otherwise been used by the government for the
Mhm.
businesses, um, do you believe that an extension of this logic would be that all those resources that the companies take back would be reinvested into the company to better compete against other companies. And they would have to either one, make their product better, or two, make their prices lower. Do you agree with all that?
Yep. Yeah. Once again, I think yeah, generally that's the case. Yeah, I don't disagree so
Okay,
far.
cool. So if we take the entire tax revenue the governments have taken for like the past 200 years, let's say I don't
Mhm.
know how much that is, but let's say it's $100 trillion. Do you
Mhm.
see how, in this case, the companies would be $100 trillion more effective in making their product better or lowering their prices, and doing so to the point where prices are so incredibly cheap that like even poor people can buy them? What do you think?
Um. So yeah, I guess my issue there is that I think that ignores the effects that the redistribution that the government does has on the economy as well.
Okay.
That's what I guess where the disagreement I guess lies is that yeah I agree that like if we there would be some to some degree a level of growth that these companies would have if we didn't redistribute. I guess my challenge would be I think that there's a case to be made that the way the government redistributes allows for more wealth to be generated in a way that's more efficient than if we had just let the companies continue to keep all the money they have.
Okay,
I guess
so for,
yeah.
at the end of the day, it's
Yeah.
just going to be a cost benefit analysis for you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, okay, interesting, interesting. Um, okay, so let's take the free market impoverished people, and we'll take the welfare state impoverished people, and
Hmm.
compare these two. So, in the welfare state impoverished people, what you have is businesses that have been taxed. Let's say like their entire lifetime, obviously, like for the past 200 years they've been taxed. So corporate
Hmm.
taxes are whatever 20%, 30%, things
Hmm.
like this. So they don't
Hmm.
reinvest that money into the economy, but instead that money is taken out, and some of that money is used as welfare for the people at the bottom. Um,
Hmm.
would you agree with me that how do I word this? That a lot of money in government is not used for welfare.
Um, yeah, I would agree with that. I'll also just this probably isn't like super relevant, but I'll just caveat. I'm not the biggest fan of corporate taxes in general. Like this is like a super sort of policy economics speak, but I prefer other forms of taxation. But yeah, that's irrelevant to the topic. But yeah, in terms of your question, yeah, I do think there are other forms of government spending that are on welfare. I generally think that there are like generally it's because I think there are some things that the government spends on that aren't welfare that does have some utility as well in society. But yeah, it depends on this case by case basis. There are definitely things that the government does that I think are really really bad. Like I won't dispute that.
Okay, that's fair. Um, I'm actually curious because I want to look this up. How much percentage of tax revenue is spent on welfare? revenue.
From what I know, and yeah, I'll probably need to Google it as well. But from what I remember, I think in the case of most developed countries, it's usually like the majority of the budget. But I might be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
It says
Yeah.
in the United States, 72% of the United States welfare spending is uh, 72% of the budget is welfare spending, which
Mhm.
is interesting to me. So, but I'm not sure how much of that is Social Security, and I have problems with Social Security. But Social Security isn't welfare.
Mhm.
Well, it's a form. It's a very muddy form of welfare. Um,
Mhm.
but okay, if I could give you the two options, the free
Mhm.
market impoverished people, where all the money the companies use that could have been either taxed, which is reinvested into the companies to make it more easier for more customers to buy into, versus the state that we have nowadays, where 70% of the, and let's say 50%, because oh wait, hold on, which is the total revenue minus Social Security, medical, payroll taxes. Wait, how much percentage is this Social Security? Whatever, doesn't matter. Versus the 70% of welfare spending that we have in the country nowadays. Which
Mhm.
system do you think would benefit more impoverished people? Do you think it would be today's state?
Well, okay. So, I mean, first of all, I'll start off by saying I don't think the U.S. has the ideal like welfare system. I think there's a lot of things that I think the U.S. spends on that are probably really bad and inefficient as well when it comes to welfare. So I just want to throw that out there
We
because
probably agree on that.
yeah, I definitely wouldn't defend the U.S. system. I think there are way better ones out there. Um, but yeah, if it's hard to compare because it is like a counterfactual, right? Like we're kind of comparing one
It's
that
hard because
exists
we don't
versus
have
one
numbers in
that's
front of us, you know?
yeah, I guess that's a bigger deal for me than it is for you because like I look at things very empirically when it comes to economics. Like I'm like kind
Mm-hmm.
of I take the standard view, right? So it's like if it was the case that it could be proven that your system was better for decreasing poverty, then fuck it, I'd become an ANCAP tomorrow. But
Yes, actually,
yeah.
I have something about Social Security that I learned about today that I want to talk to you about
Mhm.
later. But right now, let's
Okay.
stick to this. But yeah, so if you had to
Mhm.
take a guess, just a guess, which do you
Mhm.
think would be better for the impoverished people? The free market capitalist system for the past 200 years that they reinvest their profits into their companies, therefore making their product better and cheaper,
Mhm.
versus today's American or U.S. government, where 70% of their welfare is given to the population. Which of those two groups do you think of the impoverished people would benefit better, in your opinion? Just a
Mm.
guess.
Yeah, I think I would still choose the welfare state just because I do believe there are some things that, like as I mentioned, despite how inefficient I think the US government does a lot of its welfare spending and stuff like that, I do think there are good programs that I do think do a lot for impoverished people that I just don't see being compensated for in a completely free market system.
Okay. That's fine for you to disagree with. I
Hmm.
So the way I see it is that we only took one aspect of the free market. All we did was have corporations in that free market. But what I
Hmm.
didn't include was very, very important things like property would be reinvested the same as the corporations would be. Property would be reinvested to the point where property would be better and it would be cheaper, far, far cheaper than it would be today. And that includes like tax credits and stuff, which many people are not, able to get nowadays. But like if you take that
Hmm.
across the board, all taxes are gone, and every single aspect of the economy has to compete to make their product better and cheaper. You would have this across the board. Prices would be deflated extraordinarily for property, corporations, any type of products, food services, um, what is like other product services like plumbing, electricity, Wi-Fi, insurance. If you just take this across the board, prices would deflate for everything across the board because
Hmm.
everybody wants profit, and to get profit, they reinvest their profits into the economy so that they get more money. And while their money is building, what they're doing is the businesses that get this money in the
Hmm.
form of investors have the opportunity to compete more efficiently against their competitors. And since everyone's competing, they always have to get better at making things more eligible for consumers. So that's the way I look at it, and that's the way that it would happen if we agree on all the things we agreed on, which we did. But I guess at the end of the day, you don't see how it would be more beneficial to the impoverished.
Yeah, well, so I guess to go back to kind of my rebuttal, it's just that like I think that there are the kind of when we talk about the cost benefit analysis, I think that like there is obviously a cost to things the government does, like taxing, but I think the part that maybe we're not focusing on that, like the one that I'm like kind of talking about when it comes to the state system is I think that there's a benefit that the government has when they redistribute. And I think that redistribution also leads to a lot of similar like effects because when the government redistributes to people like that
Like what?
we also yeah so like the say like when you say like for example when if the government wouldn't tax there would be more entrepreneurship, there would be more people opening businesses, there would be more competition. I actually think that to some extent we can see that that also happens when the government does redistribute. So I think like again like this is like an empirical case that I would make, which is that I think there are studies that that was done for like food stamps in the United States where like food stamps programs have actually been shown to like lead to an increase in entrepreneurship because obviously when poor people who want to start a business have some sort of safety net that they feel like they won't like fucking like die if they don't have like if they try to take a risk and invest in starting a business,
Mm-hmm.
then they're more likely to want to start businesses. And that's kind of how I see the government can play a role in even influencing the economy and those kind of factors as well. And so that's why it's like, yeah, it's a matter of like the cost benefit analysis to me, where it's like I think that there's the benefit that the government can make with its redistribution, even though there's a cost to it in terms of reducing, in some sense, some companies ability to compete or ability to grow. I think that it can benefit in like in a macroeconomic sense in terms of allowing other actors in the economy to flourish.
Okay. Um. Okay, I have a question for you. Would it change your
Sure.
opinion at all if I were to say that um the so so we have the difference between my free market and your welfare state.
Yeah.
Would it change your opinion at all if the government, in and of itself, to redistribute the money, took 30% of the revenue only
Mhm.
for operation costs alone? So that means that 70% of the revenue that they're reallocating is
Yeah.
actually going back to, and for this example, all of the tax revenue is welfare. So 70%
Yeah.
of the tax revenue that they're taking from
Mhm.
businesses are reallocated to the impoverished. Whereas in my free market case, 100% of the revenue would be benefiting the consumers. Would that
Mhm.
sway you at all? Or would you still be on the government side? Because
So
there's a
that's true.
30% operation cost for government.
Mhm. If that's true, that would definitely change my opinion, but I think I'm actually familiar with the thing you're citing. That's the study that was done for like 70% to 30 like I think it was like a paper on like Mises.org or something like that. I don't remember which
Mm-hmm.
website, but that was like it said like 30% goes to like essentially the bureaucracy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I actually did like quite a bit of digging into that, like because like welfare debates are like research is quite a big passion of mine. I did a bit of research into that
Sure.
a long time ago, and one thing that I think the person who wrote the article, I think like talking about that study, actually misinterpreted it. So it's not that the bureaucracy is like consuming or like that like 30%, but actually it's just the what they didn't think what they didn't look into is that the welfare basically the way that welfare is redistributed is in two ways, right? It's one way is cash benefits, the other way is in-kind benefits, which are
Mm-hmm.
non-cash benefits. And I think from what I recall, I have to go back and look at my research on that. But from what I recall, took they looked at only the spending that the government did on direct cash benefits as welfare spending, And I think the other spending that was done on in-kind benefits, they counted as just being part of the bureaucracy. And obviously, if you ignore like that is like a form of redistribution, you say that's just bureaucracy, then yeah, you're going to see a large portion of welfare being spent on bureaucracy. But it's not actually the case that it's bureaucracy. That's but yeah, again, that's a very like empirical sort of niche point that not a lot of people know about. But yeah, that is some I have actually looked into that like a long time ago because it was a really big libertarian talking point, and I've gotten super mad and like yelled at a lot of libertarians about it. But yeah.
Damn. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
just interested in your position of
Yeah.
how much more effective you believe a welfare state is
Yeah.
than a free market. That's what I'm trying to get at. I'm just curious if you think
Mhm.
it's like if it is worth it. But yeah, that's a fair defense. I don't know too much about that study yet. Anyway,
Mhm.
that's just something I found, but I was just interested in getting your opinion on gauging how much more efficient you think the welfare state is.
Mhm. Yeah, but no,
Um,
I'll say this, right? There is definitely a threshold at which, if there was like such a large degree in inefficiency of the welfare state, that I'd probably say like, yeah, there's probably a certain threshold for where we probably should consider, if not like getting rid of entirely, at least significantly reducing it. But I'm just not convinced that we are anywhere close to that threshold.